evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Monday, March 9th meeting of the Quincy City Council Finance Committee. Madam Clerk, could you call a roll?
Councilor King. Present. Councilor Kroll. Present. Councilor DeBona. Present. Councilor Harris. Councilor Yang. Councilor Mahoney. Councilor Palmucci. Chairman, Councilor Phelan. Chairman McCarthy.
Present.
7 members of the quorum.
Thank you. I'm going to read the open meeting law language first. Pursuant to the open meeting law, any person may make an audio or video recording of this public meeting or may transmit the meeting through any medium. Attendees are therefore advised that such recordings or transmissions are being made, whether perceived or unperceived, by those present and are deemed acknowledged and permissible. Thank you very much. So this evening, and I know that I hope folks had a chance to talk to City Solicitor Timmons over the past 2 weeks, but it's an item that we had on the agenda a few weeks ago, and it is the order of takings of land at 24 Broad Street, 3945 Broad Street, and 40 Field. Just to make one note on the agenda tonight, the second appropriation of $3 million for Broad Meadows is going to be kept in committee, as Mr. Hines needed more time to put a presentation together for us so that we'd understand the $3 million and exactly where it's going to go to the improvement of Broad Meadows in regards to protecting it facility-wise due to the storm damage it had a few years ago. The 2020-011 land order of taking is an item that we had approved $32 million to be looked at in regards to the entire project down in the Broad Street area. And I'd like to first introduce Jim Masterman, who flew in here at the last second, and Jim Timmons, who will be taking some questions, but I'd like to open it up to the committee members for questions in regards to this vote tonight of this land taking down on Broad Street. Does any of the committee members have any questions for Mr. Masterman or Mr. Timmons? No questions. Could I get Jim to come to the podium, or either Jim Masterman come to the podium just for a second?
Councilors.
Good evening. Jim, I just had one question. This land order of taking, I know that we had a range that was supplied to my councilors, I think, this evening by Madam Clerk in regards to a memo that we received on December 12th of last year to give us an idea of where we were going to go money-wise in regards to the takings. Can you speak to that a little bit? Has it changed at all? I think we were in the same area of dollars the last time we spoke.
Sure. Why a range? Maybe the question that is being posed here. Each of these properties were examined by Stephen Foster, our appraiser. It's someone the council might be familiar with, MAI appraiser. They were all reviewed by Pamela McKinney. The council is familiar with her work. But why the range? The best way to describe it is we were not looking to come up with a particular number at this point, other than to shape for the council what we thought the likely range of values would be. We didn't want to go before the council and say this is what the number must be without having a fulsome discussion with you as to what went into each of these appraisals, and talk about data if you want to, talk about the way the approach was, rather than just accepting that this is what Mr. Foster's opinion of value was. It would have allowed for us to talk about the appraisal process as we've always done. I'm happy to go through it with you if you like. We believe that after examining all of the information that we have at our disposal, we're now pretty familiar now with the market, quite frankly, having done a number of these over the last year or so, that we have, in fact, a very strong idea of the market itself. And then you apply it to these properties. We're very comfortable that each of these ranges sets the parameters of the exposure to the city, without getting into what the owner might do in terms of his or her own approach to value, we tried to take it in the best interests of the owner as well as where we thought the numbers would be, to try to get some sense of exposure. And that's really why there's a range here. So if I were to ask the appraiser to come in with a set number, he could have come in at the low end. It's unlikely he'd come at the higher end, but someplace in between. And yet, I thought it was appropriate in this situation, so you get some sense that, yeah, we can't control what the owner does, but we're pretty comfortable that this is the range of dollars that we can defend regardless. And each of them have an assumption built in it. There are different cap rates, there are different values per square foot, those sorts of things that we'll make the final judgment on, but we were hoping to have that discussion over the last couple of weeks, and I'm happy to do what I can today.
Okay, thanks, Jim. I've got a question. Jim Timmons, just for a second. I see that we have 24 Broad, 3945 Broad, and 40 Field on the agenda. Were we moving on 40 Field also?
Yes,
We are.
that's part of it.
Okay. At first, I thought it was only the two, and I see 40 Field here tonight. So any discussion that you folks have had, you have determined that 40 Field is in the range that we should be introducing this evening.
And you'll note, because of the nature of the property, we were able to narrow that range. It's not as broad a range as the other two properties, so we were able to be, our appraiser was able to be a little more precise.
Okay. Mrs. Mahoney, you were away. Do you have any questions from Mr. Masser and Mr. Timmons on the takings?
Yeah, I had a couple questions. I called Mr. Timmons earlier today in regards to and he said that he was going to check into this, in regards to the area that we're taking these, and where the police station is going to be, what the determination was for the flood zone?
I was able to review the question raised by you, Councilor Mahoney. The question was whether the property is in the floodplain and how that might influence both the decision to acquire it and the value. Well, the property is in the 100-year floodplain as indicated by the 2017 FEMA flood map. So that's the most recent, and that was a corrected flood map. You may recall that there was some activity back at the time involving FEMA and amending flood maps. Well, this property is clearly within the 100-year floodplain. The entire neighborhood is the Stop and Shop site, Stop and Shop supermarket. Much of that area is in the floodplain. I consulted with Mr. Shea from Woodard & Curran this afternoon, who confirmed that there's awareness of that. He indicated that, as you're all aware, there are buildings there today. They've been there for decades. That the proposed public safety complex has taken into account the location. The elevations of finished floors are going to be adjusted in order to be at least 3 feet above this 2017 floodplain designation. And then the other thing they're doing, which is significant, is that all the emergency vehicles that are going to be housed there are going to be on the second floor of a parking deck in order to ensure that they're fully out of the floodplain during a flooding event. So the question that you raised to me today is something that has been considered and is part of the whole planning process for the project.
Okay, and the other question that I have in regards to that, planning and developing on a flood zone in that nature, how much does that add to the bottom line for the cost of building the building?
Right, and I think that's all, that was discussed, if I'm correct, back at the time that the original budget for the entire project was discussed and voted, that there were components of that. But I'm not certain because that's not something I directly addressed.
And the other question that I had was in regards to, I know that Father Bill's, the transition process for Father Bill's, I know that you're purchasing a property into which what address is that, to which they eventually will move into? What's the transition plan for Father Bill's?
Councilor Mahoney, Father Bill's. Father Bill's, we first determined Father Bill's as a homeless shelter was a bona fide public purpose. That was an issue that we addressed right up front. The idea that we would take 39 Broad Street and then relocate, we thought that the entire social services component of this was a bona fide public purpose. The movement of Father Bill's to wherever Father Bill's would go to is rather complicated in that Father Bill's is a tenant of the city now at this property, and there's a question as to whether Father Bill's is entitled to relocation benefits as any other private party would. The determination was made that in fact they were, but there's a lot more that goes into that. We're trying to figure out how long it will take them, where are they going, what are they going to do, and what property they're going to go into, and what it has to be done to, and it's going to be 39 Broad, what has to be done to 39 Broad during that period of time. Most of it has to do with the sequencing of the project, trying to be sure that the property is clear in order for us to proceed on the public safety building. In order to do that, we've got to move Father Bill somewhere. Whether it's going to be a permanent location or a temporary location, those decisions have not been made.
Okay. I would think that we would want those decisions to be a little bit more worked out before we get too far down the line. And then the other question, there's another question that I had in regards to just in the statement of, with regards to the VFW post, I think this might be towards Mr. Timmons. The VFW post was, as I said before, the title, this might be to you. I didn't get my chance to give you a call. I apologize. I've been very busy with the financial crisis things that are going on these days. But the title.
I hadn't heard about this.
Yeah, I have. I have, because that's been keeping me very busy. The Fed seems to be changing again. The title of the VFW post, it appeared that that was going to revert back to the city of Quincy in 2010. This land was identified since 2010, the VFW post, as property for taking that the city of Quincy wanted to take. And at the time, somehow the reverter became not an issue, and it wasn't reverting back to the city of Quincy, and the property was sold. Then during one of the CIP, prior to me becoming a counselor, there was a $1.3 million that the city had put into a capital improvement plan to purchase the VFW post, to which it was taken out again. So what is the final cost that the VFW post is at currently? The estimate.
The estimated acquisition.
Yep.
1.7 to 1.95.
1.7 to 1.95. So the city could have acquired it for $500,000. They had put in $1.3 million at the CIP back in, I want to say 2016, 2017. I could ask the auditor to tell me that. And now we are at 1.7, 1.9. Madam Auditor, when was that CIP? That's okay.
If I may.
Problems?
I can address the reverter issue. You raised it
Yep.
last time I was here, and we looked into it immediately. You are correct that within the deeds of conveyance and the chain of title to this property, there is language in a couple of those instruments that speaks to what happens if the property is no longer used for the VFW post. And the language is pretty explicit in terms of what happens. It could revert back to the city. Let's just assume that that's what goes on. All right. And let's assume for a moment that it is, in fact, an enforceable reverter. It's an enforceable reversionary interest. And I'll tell you why I question that for a moment. But nevertheless, just assume that that the instruments on record are lawfully enforceable, and in fact, the city has an interest in the real estate that it's about to acquire. What happens? What happens is that it doesn't change the action we'd ask you to take, because we want to clear the title regardless. So your order of taking will clear out any of those issues, even when there is sort of a blemish on our title. We want it to be clear starting today.
Thank you.
Clear starting today. So I would recommend that the order of taking is done for the purposes of conveyancing and clarity of title. Now, what happens when there is this issue of a question as to whether an owner isn't really the owner of everything, which is what you're raising? You know, the question is, does the city really own a part of the property that it's taking? All that affects is how much money is paid. In order for a landowner to receive the money that you're about to award, they have to prove clear title. If there is an encumbrance on title, they don't get all the money. So after we fleshed this out, we wrote a letter to counsel for the owner, for the Iorios, and we said, we have an issue. There is problems with title.
So this is problems with title since the last time I spoke with you that you've determined?
Last time you spoke, as a result of what you raised, Mr. Timmons and I said, okay, let's find out what's going on. We ran the title, as I told you before we had, but it didn't go far enough back to pick up these reversionary interests. We found them, we asserted the city's interest in them, and we said, it's not going to affect whether we take it or not, because we're going to take it. We have our own reasons to clear title, but it does affect the owner's right to receive the compensation because they don't own it all. So we wrote that letter. And of course, they said, you're not right. We own it all. Those reversionary interests are not enforceable. And
They certainly
why don't
are
you just
now.
drop the whole thing.
Yeah.
The way it would work out then is I would recommend that the taking of this property and the award, we hold back the award until we figure out who has clear title. And this issue will have to be determined by the courts.
So what's the award when you say, what's the value of the award, let's say?
The award would be whatever you vote, the 1.7 to 1.9. That money is not tendered until such time as clear title is proved by the owner.
Okay, so if clear title is proved by the owner, then the 1.7 or 1.9 goes to the owner?
Correct.
And if the clear title is not awarded to the owner, the city does not pay the 1.7 or 1.9? But my question then goes back to, how did the city allow that property that was supposed to, why would we not have gone through that exercise prior to allowing that property to have been sold?
Why the reversionary was not exercised prior to that?
Prior to your time?
That is a political decision that I don't have any interest in.
So that was a political decision, and this is the reason why I was suggesting that we needed outside recourse for that, because the city solicitor was here at that time when we made that, and this is when I was told that this is not what would happen. And it's very clever, because this land was supposed to revert back to the city of Quincy. There were taxes owed to the city of Quincy for that. The property was sold. I'm sure I'd like to know that the taxes were paid for that property at that time. I'm not sure if Susan O'Connor could tell me that. But at the same time, we're now being asked, the taxpayers of the city of Quincy, for land that could have been reverted back to the city of Quincy. Could have been reverted back to the city of Quincy back at that time, as now being asked to pay 3 times the value.
It doesn't happen automatically.
It doesn't happen
Counsel.
automatic, but it certainly would have been something that we should have looked at.
It means litigating the rights of an owner who purchased in good faith, a bona fide purchaser in the market, bought it. And that owner has rights, and I'm sure that we'll hear all about it in the courts.
I'm sure you will too.
But in the meantime, to
but so did
protect
the
the
citizens
taxpayer,
so do the taxpayers of the city of
we
Quincy.
will not be paying that money until the title is resolved.
Yeah, but the same thing, we knew we wanted that property back when the first sale was made, and the same issue could have been raised, and we could have potentially have not acquired, but actually kept the property in our hands in the city of Quincy for the cost of the exchange of not getting the taxes paid. I know that
It's not what the title says. The
It's not the-
title says that this was sold arm's length to the Iori family, and they paid good cash for it.
I understand what you're
If
saying,
At that
but the
point,
title, to get a clear title and actually recognize this is what you're saying, is that you'll go to court for that now, and that will be another expense to the taxpayers of the city of Quincy, where we could have done that as
and
well.
it would have been at that time as well.
It would have been at that time, but it wouldn't be 1.7, 1.9. It would have been closer to $500,000 as opposed to that. Because that's what it sold for. It would have been $500,000 the cost of the taxes, the cost of the investment for the investigation of it, the legal portions of that. That's just very disturbing to me, because whether or not and it should be disturbing to you as well as you're looking into this, because it's as you said, it was a political decision, or it looks
Well,
as
a
though.
political
looks as
decision in
though-
that is that why a particular person didn't exercise this particular at that time for that.
Same
There's a lot of
administration.
reasons for that. I mean, you know as well, it probably came before the council at that time as well.
I don't think
I
it
don't
did,
know
no.
the answer. I don't
Well,
know the answer to that.
I can tell you absolutely, positively, I did the research on that. I had gone back and looked at that, and as far as I can tell, it did not come before the council.
I'm
There was
not
no
arguing
one,
with
there
you.
was
I'm
not
just
one
saying,
article. I know, but I'm just making,
Can't speak to that, so
I'm
I don't
making
know.
a statement for the
What I can tell you
record.
is right now, at this point, we understand the issue. The owners disagree today as they would have then. It's going to have to be litigated, and that's what probably is going to happen. But no money will transfer until it's resolved.
So let's, just to go back then, go back to just for the floodplain, this is to you, Mr. Timmons, thank you. It's very upsetting, I will tell you for the record that is very, very upsetting to me, and as a taxpayer of the city of Quincy, and to know that we have to go into litigation for a property that we probably should never have had to pay for, that should upset everybody here in the council, because it's just wrong as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, I've said my piece too, thank you. I have another question in regards to.
I'm going to give Mr. Harris a chance to jump in. I'll come back to you.
That's fine.
Councilor Harris, I asked everyone else earlier. I didn't get any comments out of everyone. I just wanted to.
Thank you, and Mr. Chairman, as you know, we visited together the area and the projects that's going to be taking place, and it was my first time there, and what's going to take place is something that city needs, and I think it's the right thing to do. So I'm going to make a motion for a positive recommendation.
Okay, so there's a motion on the floor. Discussion on the motion? Councilor Phelan?
I'd like to ask a couple of questions of the solicitor through you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to clarify, on the vote we're taking tonight, we're not actually, well, okay.
Good evening, Council.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Simmons. Just a clarification, the vote we're taking tonight, I see a lot of figures being thrown around, but we're just voting for the taking. We are not voting for a sum of money or anything.
Well, as part of that, there has to be an award of damages made this evening. So
Okay.
we will be determining and awarding damages if the taking order is approved this evening.
So if the taking order was, if we approve this taking order, is there a separate financial order, or is that just part of the order as a whole?
It's part of the taking order and the discussion. That's something that Mr. Masterman was going to discuss with you later, but that's part of what's going to happen. You should be aware that the money has already been appropriated for this project. There was a vote taken, it's $30+ million for the entire project, and what's going on now is land acquisition that was presented back at the time, but the particulars of the takings and the particular values that are being assigned from among that $30 million pool is being determined tonight.
So basically, we're voting for the takings tonight. The money has already been
Right, this is the
appropriated.
next step, but the money's already been appropriated for the project.
Okay, and we're
And at the time, this memo that I provided to
Yep.
you, that was based on data that our appraiser was reporting to us back then, and then formal appraisals in draft were prepared for purposes of this activity tonight.
So these are the most recent appraisals? These are
That's
the-
correct, that's correct.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor.
The flood question, again, you were saying that when we were talking about the floodplain, could you explain again, where will the emergency vehicles be stored if there was a flood in the area?
I beg your pardon?
You said in the floodplain, when we were talking about the floodplain, you said where would the vehicles, the emergency vehicles, be stored if there was a flood in the area? Just repeat that part for me. You said we were talking about the flood zone, and that the vehicles will be stored on the second floor. Is that true?
Yes, it's the 100-year floodplain, which means in the event of a,
100-year storm.
pardon me?
In the event of a 100-year storm.
You understand that? Okay, yes. But the entire region, I just went, as I told you I would, I was not able to get anyone in engineering after you called me this afternoon, but I went to the GIS map, and I'm a lawyer, not an engineer, but that entire area is all, you may recall from your activity with the track, that's all historic fill area that is predominantly in the floodplain. So most of the buildings and structures are in the 100-year flood.
And you said the emergency vehicles would be stored. Where would they be stored so that they would not be impacted by the flood zone? Should there be a flood? Should there be a storm?
Well, these are things I don't know.
I thought you just said that they would be in the second floor garage.
Pardon?
I thought you said in your statement earlier that they'd be on a second floor garage, or that they would be stored offsite. I'm just trying to follow what you said earlier. I wrote down second.
Well, what I did was I contacted Joe Shea, as I said, and he told me, I have the benefit of 4 sentences from him, where he indicated that this has all been calculated in the preliminary drawings, and the goal is to have all first floors at least 3 feet above, and then the parking area where the emergency vehicles are located on the second floor, so that they'll actually be in better shape than exists today.
So if we have a 100-year storm and you have the vehicles on the second floor, how do they access? How do they get out to get to the emergency?
Is this something you can answer?
If you have a 100-year storm, which happens more often than 100 years, and it's on the second floor.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I think what would happen is along the lines of what happens today, is that vehicles that are potentially in an area that may be affected by a 100-year storm would be moved prior to the storm so they can respond to the emergency. That happens now in a number of locations.
I
It would
guess-
happen, and by the way, for a 100-year storm, it would happen virtually everywhere in the city. So
And did you ask Mr. Shea, with the floodplain changes, how rapidly they do change with FEMA? Will this area be in 10, 15, 20 years? What will be the impact of that area?
No, I'm not
so-
that I'm aware. You said, did I ask him?
I'm asking you, is that part of the plan? We have $110 million that we're going to be
Why-
estimating for a building that's being built in a flood zone, so I'm trying to understand the longevity of the building potentially.
Mr. Walker actually reached out to Mr. Shea. I'll have him. Sure.
that location is where the police station is
Currently.
today.
Yeah.
That police station and public safety headquarters is sustainable for future development. That is the location that is best suited to hold a police station and a public safety headquarters. Does not mean there are some engineering challenges associated with it. Of course there are. We're a coastal city, 27 miles of coastline, a vast floodplain, and we have to deal with those. But in cases like this where buildings already exist, we can work around those through engineering and practical planning.
And have we cleared any of those practical plans as of yet, just in the area that we know that we're trying to build? Do we know that the challenges that we're going to have to?
I think Mr. Timmons just outlined a few of them.
Okay.
As you know, the council appropriated in the fall full design and engineering money, plus the land acquisition money. And this body will once again have another bite of this apple when the full construction project is back before it.
And then my last question is to the effect of what is happening in the markets today. Does it make sense to actually to be negotiating at this time, or would it be of value to hold in the negotiation, not knowing what the markets are going to do?
I would say that the police station, the public safety headquarters, our first responders need a new home now. And this administration is not willing to wait any longer.
Is it going to be built tomorrow?
It is going to be built in a timeline that is conditional upon the property acquisitions first, and the property acquisitions as soon as humanly possible.
So by 20, what, will the building be built? Just
We'll be back before this body with a full schedule and construction timeframe when that work is done.
I would say cautiously that the market right now is so volatile that I'd be careful about what we promise, and maybe holding a couple of months would not be something that would be a bad thing. This is my actual last question, though. The appropriations have been determined in the range of values. Should they come in less than, not more than, is there any way that we can assure that none of these monies will be spent on any other area, just on these fundings?
The bond order is explicit that
Yes, I don't know if it
the
is.
bond order appropriation is explicit, that these monies are to be used for this purpose and this purpose only. We cannot use that money for anything else other than a public safety headquarters.
What I mean by that, though, is that these are for purchases of the land acquisitions.
If-
And I don't want to see if we were
If
to
we
buy
get
something
it-
for 1.5 or $1 million less, that should actually make our total
No, it
costs go
will-
down, not go up.
exactly. That's exactly what would happen. We would just fold in any,
Not transferred into any other account. It
we
would-
couldn't do that without council approval.
Okay, just want to make sure, because I know in the past, there's been other
No, it
bonds that you
doesn't.
have been able to do that. Thank you.
I got a motion on the floor from Counselor Harris. I don't see any more deliberation. I think Mr. Walker made some great points that the police station is really needed now, and this is money that we have approved. This is just giving it out now, getting into the administration so they execute it properly, and start to use some of the money that we approved to work on Broad Street, which I'm sure that our sub, Woodard and Curran, the city, and the administration will look at that area and make sure that all those issues are covered that Mrs. Mahoney was talking about. So with that, all those in favor? All those opposed? The ayes have it. Mrs. Mahoney? Nay? Okay. The second item, as I mentioned earlier, was the appropriation 2020-047 for $3 million for Broad Meadows that we're going to leave in committee. We'll get back on the agenda in a few weeks when Mr. Hines comes forward with us with a presentation that will show the sustainability and the improvements down in Broad Meadows in case there's a storm, which is a very good move for that area. So with that, I adjourn.
This is the public meeting. I'd like to call to order Monday, March 9th, 7:20 public hearing, Council Order 2020-041, utility grant of location, Mass Electric, Woburn Road. At this point, I'd like to ask anyone wishing to speak in favor or opposition to come to the podium and state your name and address. If you do not wish to speak, but would like your support or opposition recorded, please sign in on the sheet on the table at the back of the chamber. Okay, so is there anybody who would like to speak in favor? Nobody to speak in favor? And anybody would like to speak opposed? Okay, seeing no further public comment, I wish to close this public hearing at 7:21. Good evening again. I'd like to call to order Monday, March 9th, 7:25 public hearing, Council Order 2020-042, utility grant of location, Mass Electric, Verizon, Woodcliff Road. Is there anybody who would like to speak in favor could come to the podium? Anybody in favor? Okay, seeing none. Anybody who would be opposed? Please come up, state your name, please, and your address.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Raymond Hunt. I live at 64 Woodcliff Road, Quincy. And I object to the pole because of, it's like 15 feet from my dining room window. And there's already one right across the street.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it'd be very unsightly to put another pole there. The pole that they want to put this pole to support the pole across the street. The pole across the street is dead plumb, it's level, it's not leaning over. There's no need for another pole.
Yes. Thank you for your testimony. Please, thank you. Anybody else speak against? We do have, Madam Clerk, we have some letters of opposition.
Yes, I did put them in your packets this evening. There are 2 letters from Ray Hunt, who is here this evening, and another letter from Catherine O'Brien, and they wish to both be on the record. They are opposed to a new pole on Woodcliff.
Very good. Okay, so at this point, seeing no further public comment, I will close this hearing at 7:26. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Monday, March 9th meeting of the City Council. Madam Clerk, can you call the roll, please?
Counselor Kane. Present. Counselor Crowe. Present. Counselor DeBona. Present. Counselor Harris. Present. Counselor Mahoney. Present. Counselor McCarthy. Present. Counselor Palmucci. Counselor Phelan. Present. President Liang.
Present.
8 members, you have a quorum.
Thank you. If you'll stand and join me in a moment of silence for all of the men and women serving here and abroad. If you'll join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, can you read the open meeting law, please?
Pursuant to the open meeting law, any person may make an audio or video recording of this public meeting or may transmit the meeting through any medium. Attendees are therefore advised that such recordings or transmissions are being made, whether perceived or unperceived, by those present and are deemed acknowledged and permissible.
Thank you. And if we can go to the first item on the agenda, please.
First item on the agenda is the coronavirus update by Health Commissioner Ruth Jones.
Thank you. Good evening, Ruth. How are you?
Shorter than everyone.
I'm the same way. I was looking earlier and said I didn't have to pull that down.
Good evening. Thank you for... Does it? Okay. Thank you for having me.
Of course.
I'm here tonight to give you an update on the coronavirus. Just a little bit of a background of what happened in the past couple of days. The Mass Department of Public Health on March 8th announced 15 new presumptive positive cases of COVID-19, which is coronavirus, bringing the total number of confirmed or presumptive positive cases in Massachusetts to 28. Just to let you know, the numbers have changed since I left the office today, and I'll update you on the latest numbers that we have. All 15 cases that were announced yesterday were in direct connection to the Biogen conference that they had in Boston. And there were different numbers from different counties. Norfolk County, in this particular instance, had 4 cases, and one of those cases was a Quincy person, a Quincy resident. And so, excuse me, that's why I'm here tonight, to give you an update, particularly on that, and update you on the new numbers. So the Quincy case is a female in her 40s who's associated with the Biogen conference. She works for Biogen and was at that particular time, at that particular conference, is isolating at home and recovering. I just wanted to assure everyone that she had very little movement through Quincy when she came from Boston back home when she was symptomatic. This particular case has no children, so there's no involvement with Quincy Public Schools with this particular case. We know that the risk is still low in Massachusetts. It's still low in Quincy. This is our only presumptive positive case. And just to clear up a little bit presumptive, the difference between a presumptive case and a confirmed case. A presumptive case is when the person is tested in Massachusetts. The tests right now go to the state lab in Jamaica Plain. And if it's positive from the state lab, it's considered a presumptive case. It's sent to the CDC in Atlanta, Georgia. And when it comes back from the CDC, if it's still positive, it's then considered a confirmed case. So that's the difference in terminology. We've only had one confirmed case in Massachusetts, and that was the original case from the student from UMass Boston. So that's where we're at this point. Just to update you on some new numbers that happened since I left the office until I came here, the State Department of Public Health announced, because they're in the process of doing these tests and they take a little bit of time to get them all. I think there were 60 people from Biogen alone that got tested over last weekend. And so now the numbers have gone up to 40 presumptive cases and one confirmed case. That confirmed case still is that original case from UMass Boston. Of the 40 presumptive cases, 10 are now from Norfolk County. And I'm happy to say we have gotten no more than that one presumptive case that we originally got over the weekend. So I just wanted to explain a little bit about coronavirus. Coronaviruses have been around for a long time. They're the type of virus that causes the common cold, that causes respiratory symptoms in people. This is referred to as a novel coronavirus because it is a new strain. And with the new strain, your concern is, thank you. It's picking up something, thank you. With the new strain, the issue may be that nobody has any immunity to it, so more people would be able to be infected by the virus. The good thing that we have found from this virus, the high-risk group is mainly people over the age of 60 that have underlying medical conditions, respiratory illness, diabetes, heart disease, or some sort of immune system issue. It doesn't seem to be affecting children, which is a good thing. And most of the cases are anybody from their 40s to their 60s. And most of the symptoms that we've seen in most of these cases throughout the United States have been mild. We have, at the health department since this began, and this began for us probably the beginning of February, we've been monitoring people coming back from level 3 travel risk countries. Initially, it was China and Iran, and those people, when they came back, we were given their name from the State Department of Public Health. We contacted them through the health department. We monitor them. They take their temperatures twice a day. They monitor their symptoms. We call them. Originally, it was on a daily basis, and now it's 3 times a week. And we have had nobody have any exacerbation of any symptoms, any temperatures that have been elevated. And right now, in the city, we're presently monitoring about 35 people. Recently, the State Department of Public Health added Italy and South Korea to level 3 travel risks. And we are not physically monitoring those people, but they are given information when they come back into the United States to self-monitor and call us if they have any issues. And we have gotten no issues since then. So I think we're doing okay in Quincy. Obviously, it's an ongoing situation. The numbers change, as you can see, sometimes in a matter of hours. We have done planning. We do planning all the time for emergency management and emergency dispensing with the State Department of Public Health and with groups like the UASC and Region 4AB for emergency management. We have had meetings with key people in the city, department heads in the city, so that we can go over all the updates and make sure everyone's on the same page. And we actually have a meeting tomorrow with some of our key partners in healthcare, some of the hospitals and some of the clinics, Manet and South Cove, and some in police and fire, so that we make sure that we're ready, we're all on the same page, and that we can answer any questions that anybody might have. So I will open that up for any questions that anyone might have that I can answer anything for you.
Thank you, Ruth. So I wanted to thank you for all of the work that you've been doing,
Thank you.
not just leading into tonight and tonight's presentation and with the news that we found, but also obviously since this came on everyone's radar, and I know it's not an easy undertaking for the 8th largest city in the Commonwealth, and so I know we're in good hands with you and your office.
Oh,
And I
thank you.
appreciate everything that you guys have done with notifying us with this presentation tonight, and I know that with the information that was sent out this evening, your office is obviously open for folks to contact if they do have any questions, in addition to the support provided from the CDC. So
Right.
I wanted to start by thanking you. for
Thank you
that.
so
But
much.
No, thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
I'm going to open up to my colleagues for questions too, if that's all right. So does anybody have any questions or comments for Ruth? Councilor Grohl?
Thank you, Madam President. Through you, Ruth, good evening. Always
evening.
nice to see you. You're certainly a student of your business, there's no question. So I appreciate the update. My sort of thought or question is around communication strategy, particularly as it relates to some of the more dense senior buildings. I was actually at one of them last night, and the question sort of came up. Obviously, I know Quincy has its own housing authority where there's multiple buildings that roll up under one administration. Can you talk to us a little bit about has there been any outreach specifically to the buildings, and if not, like maybe walk us through sort of your thoughts on that?
Sure. So actually today, earlier this afternoon, I spoke with one of the residents of Tobin Towers that called and asked for some information. And so we're in the process of distributing some of our handouts to them and answering any questions that they may have. Eventually, we'll be able to go out and do some education for that. Right now, we're kind of in the middle of everything. And so we will be able to do some education. We've done educational programs all along for senior housing, just on general illnesses and viruses. This is different. But we are starting to do some outreach, and whatever we can do in between actually monitoring the cases, we will, and get some information. My thought was to have my inspectors drop off some written information to all the senior houses.
That's a really good idea.
Yeah, and that doesn't take a lot of time. Once we get them, the packets all made up, we can drop it off to the managers of all the senior houses. And then if people have a question, they can call us, but at least they have some information and factual information regarding the virus.
And that's the thing. There's a lot of dislocation as it pertains to some of the information that's out there. I know it was mentioned earlier. Now you kind of tie into what's going on in the markets with the subject that you're presenting on this evening.
Right.
So there is. I know that there's a thirst for the truth and how to get there. And I know everybody around the well pretty well. So I would also say if there was a one-pager that you kind of had off the shelf, I'd be, I'm sure we'd all be more than happy to circulate it to our distribution list. just
Absolutely,
to
I can
further
get some to
kind
each
of
council,
advance
sure.
Getting it out there, So
Sure. Absolutely.
that's what came to mind, Madam President. Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Phelan?
Yes, Madam Chairman. Madam President, just a question, Ruth. I know you kind of dovetailing on what my distinguished Ward 2 councilor brought up. In a lot of these senior buildings, there's a mixed, it's very diverse population.
Right.
And there were a lot of different languages spoken.
Right.
I think any material would have to take that into consideration.
Right, we do get a lot of good material from the State Department of Public Health and the CDC that's translated into
Okay.
other languages, and we try to incorporate as many as we can get from that source, and we'll have copies in each language that we feel is prevalent in the building. So hopefully we'll be able to accommodate everybody with that, but I agree with you, it's a very diverse population.
Yeah, I think they're probably one of the high risk. They're packed. They're a lot densely more populated in those senior homes, and there's a lot of chance, and it's a very diverse community out there.
Right.
And I think that's the group that can become the most. They see the TV, they see all the publicity, and some of the publicity is good, letting people know, but sometimes it can be an overreaction.
Sometimes it scares people, particularly the seniors, when they're sitting at home a lot, they're watching TV, and they're seeing it day in, day out, and it becomes frightening to them, so absolutely. And they are the higher risk of the population, so they're the population that we are concerned about the most and should be reaching out to the most, absolutely.
Okay, well, thank you, Ruth.
Thank
And I'd
you.
also say to you, I know you I worked with you as a department head, and you're doing a great job down
Thank
the
you
health
so much.
department. And I used to sit through some of these JUASI meetings and we did one on pandemic, I remember only just a couple of years ago, and I can remember that being, I was sitting there at the time with Drew Shealy, who was
Yep.
the health commissioner. And I feel a lot safer because I've seen the behind the scenes of what goes on and what the steps have been taken up to this point. So I thank you for the work you're doing, and I think it's a tremendous asset to the city. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilor Phelan. Does anybody else have any questions or comments for Ruth? No, okay, with that, Councilor Mahoney?
I want to thank you as well, but I also, I know that, as you said tonight before you came, and I think you said you would make sure that you keep us all notified. It is important that we all stay informed in regards to that, knowing that there is one confirmed case in Quincy and several, how many did you say that are?
We have 35 people that are being monitored, but those people who are being monitored are just being monitored for travel purposes. So they came in from a flight from one of the level 3 countries. So they're just being monitored. Those are people that are well, and that we're just monitoring them for 14 days.
Yeah.
So we make sure they don't get symptoms.
Yeah, and I just wanted to tag on to that, because sometimes when people hear that 35, and they'll think 35 people are in quarantine. No, that's, the case is that just at my office, we had several people that were in Italy and travel, and our travel has been shut down, and the people who are coming back are asked to not come into the office for 14 days.
Right,
And
and
then
then
it really
there's-
is self-monitoring,
Right.
but if symptoms do appear, and then they're asked to go get a confirmation.
Right.
So I just wanted to make sure that for anybody that heard that at home, that the reality of it is that we're trying to do our best to contain in Quincy. However, a lot of us, as we all do, we move around and do different things, and it's going to be something that we have to self-monitor ourselves as well.
Absolutely, and I think it's good that, one of the things that I feel good about is that we do not have any community transmissible coronavirus at this time in Quincy, and I think that's a great thing. Our cases, this one presumptive case is directly related to Biogen, to the Biogen conference, and all the other ones that we're monitoring so far are well and just related to travel. So to me, that's a positive
That is
sign that we have no community-acquired.
And should that change, not that I am anticipating it will, but as I was saying, if anybody's watching the news is saying that we're at the beginning stages of this, and in the next 14 days, things could change. If you could keep us up to date as well. Because I
Absolutely.
think it is a nature of being able to communicate the correct information to our
Sure.
population to let them know the status of things.
Absolutely.
And the highest population that are a concern are obviously our seniors and anybody that has a low autoimmune. And anybody who has that should know who they are and, keep in touch with your own doctors with that. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Counselor. Does anybody else have any questions or comments for Ruth? No? Okay, Ruth, I just want to also, if I could, if you could just reiterate for folks who are paying attention and listening tonight, I know that, outside news sources and social media has been talking a lot about buying masks and what do you do and stay inside. And so could you just, before we wrap up for the night, just reiterate, any precautions that we should be taking, right?
Right.
Hand
So I'm glad
sanitizer
you
sold
brought
out,
that
but
up.
wash your hands. So
Right.
if you could.
So it's not recommended, I'm going to start off with the wearing the mask. It's not recommended that the general population wear a mask. First of all, a surgical mask, a plain surgical mask, and those are the flat masks that most people are walking around wearing if they decide to wear a mask, are really ineffective against the viruses that are in the air. To wear a mask, you would need to wear an N95 mask, and the N95 mask, the mask should be put on the ill person, not people walking around who are well. There's no scientific evidence that a mask on a well person will prevent you from breathing in any of these viruses. So the mask should be saved for the person who is ill. And what has happened is people have panicked and gone out and bought a lot of masks, and now healthcare providers and our first responders are looking at some shortages in different areas of the country. And that's something that we think is a critical point, that the first responders and our healthcare providers should be the ones that have the masks. So please don't wear a surgical mask or an N95 for the general public. It's just not indicated. Other things that you can do are the same things that you would do to prevent yourself from getting flu. If you are sick, stay home. And we hope that employers listen and provide the opportunity for people to stay home without it being a problem when it's an influenza or anything else that they think they might be ill with. Washing your hands, I can't say it enough, to wash your hands. It's the #1 way to prevent the spread of any communicable disease. And in case people haven't heard me enough, and I think I've been saying this for 20 years since I've been here, you wash your hands for 20 seconds. 15 of that 20 seconds should be good scrubbing. 20 seconds is 2 courses of Happy Birthday. And if you've never tried it, go into the bathroom, start singing Happy Birthday while you're washing your hands, sing 2 courses. If you want to really get some attention, sing it out loud. And you'll be surprised at how long that is. And most of us don't wash our hands long enough. And it's the #1 way of really preventing the spread of infection. Hand sanitizer is okay to use in between. Hand sanitizer is alcohol-based, kills more bacteria than it actually does anything for viruses. But what it does is it makes your hands dry, and it makes it not a great place for viruses to live, and so the viruses fall off your hands, okay? And so it helps in between, but it does not take the place of regular hand washing with soap and water. The other thing is social distancing. If you, in flu season, we tell people not to be so friendly, not to kiss and hug and shake hands. The elbows, or I've seen people get out and the new thing is kicking feet as they get out. So however, or just waving. It's social distancing during that time when we see viruses are present. And those are really the best things. That'll prevent you from hopefully getting influenza. Same thing from hopefully getting any coronavirus if it were here. So.
Yeah. So no wearing the mask unless you're sick, and it would have to be an N95 mask if it were to even be effective. Stay at home if you're sick. Wash your hands and sing happy birthday twice out loud.
Right.
Hand sanitizer in between, and social distancing, so just no hugging. And that's another thing, too, that I just wanted to follow up on, because I've heard that, how far was this person in a social setting? If they were, how far were they from me? And from what I've read up on the information that you guys have provided through the CDC's website is that there has to be at least 15 minutes of close contact with the person if they are confirmed as sick. And so if you're just, in the room over there talking to me, then I'm not going to. But if I walk up to you and get close to your face, that's where the risk is, correct?
What the CDC and the Mass Department of Public Health say is close contact is sustained contact within 15 minutes within a 4 to 6 foot radius of another person.
Mm-hmm.
So 6 feet is pretty far away.
Yeah.
So if you're just standing there talking to someone like you normally would, face to face, you're close enough. It would have to be sustained for 15 minutes. We don't know everything there is to know about this virus. We don't know if it can stay alive on inanimate objects like tables and doorknobs. We suspect, like most coronaviruses that have been around prior to this, that it can, but experts are saying it can stay alive from anywhere from 2 hours to 9 days. So we don't know a lot of it. We don't know if you've already had it once, do you build up an immunity that you can't get it again, or can you get it a second time? Those are things that we're still waiting to hear from, but.
Well, it sounds like the washing your hands and
The best, washing your hands, hands down, washing your hands is the best thing for any communicable disease, and trying to keep your hands away from your face. Particularly if you're out shopping, you're in a supermarket, you're touching carts, you go back to the car, you wash your hands maybe with some Purell, but keep your hands away from your face. And we all touch our face, rub our nose, rub our eyes, touch everything without even thinking of it, probably thousands of times during the day. It's just human nature. So the less you can do that, if you try to pay attention to it, sometimes it makes you a little bit more aware. But
Okay. And I also have just one last question. I'm sorry. I know I had like 5 last questions for you,
That's
but
okay.
I'm just
That's
thinking
okay.
now from like, touching surfaces.
That's what I'm here for.
I was on a plane about like a week and a half ago, and I was at the tail end of a cold. And I remember when we got on the plane, we had just like the wipes to wipe down the seats around us. And so if we have, those little packets of like Lysol wipes, and, we're wiping down like our, steering wheel if we're driving and we're coming in and out of public spaces a lot, is that effective at all, or is that not?
Yeah, actually, there's a whole list, if you go on mass.gov and on the CDC, there's a whole list of EPA cleaning agents that are good, but Clorox wipes, Lysol wipes are great. Will kill coronavirus. It says it right on the Lysol wipes, will kill coronavirus. You wipe it, you let it air dry, and what we're telling people across the city, in public buildings and private buildings, take an extra 5 minutes in the morning, take a wipe down the doorknob, wipe down the counter, if you have a counter in your office or in your building, and just do that once in the morning, once at night, and it helps protect. You can do it to your steering wheel, you can do it to, a lot of the supermarkets will have Clorox wipes, bleach wipes, right there when you go in. Great idea to take it, wipe the wagon, throw it away before you touch it. Once you go back into your car, use your Purell, go home and wash your hands. And that should be something we should do all the time.
Right. It sounds like pretty much around flu season every year. Those are the same precautions we're taking.
Yeah,
So, okay.
it should be all the time.
Great.
Sure.
Sounds good. And I know, again, when I had spoken to you earlier, I know that to your office earlier, we are working on having translated items for everything that goes out there, so I appreciate that. And I also know that if folks do want to call into your office, you have translators on site as well, so that's wonderful, and I appreciate
too.
your work on that. And, I know that you guys are working on scaling that if and when the need is there, so I just want to reiterate, obviously, to your office that all of us and folks in the community, a lot of our nonprofit organizations, we're all resources for you to help get information out and share with our constituents. And so anything you need, I encourage you to reach out to us and let us know as well.
Very good. Thank you. I will do that. Thank you.
Ruth, thank you so much. I really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Madam Clerk, next item.
Number 2, 2020-058, a gift for $2,300 from various donors.
Motion to waive the reading? Okay. Do you have a motion to
Second.
approve? Okay, motion to approve by Counselor Phelan. Do we have a second? Counselor Kane? Okay. Madam Clerk, can you call the roll?
Counselor Kane. Yes. Counselor Kroll. Yes. Counselor DeBona. Yes. Counselor Harris. Counselor Mahoney. Yes. Counselor McCarthy. Yes. Counselor Phelan. Yes. President Liang.
Yes.
8 members.
Thank you. Number 3 on the agenda, please.
2020-059, a resolve.
Motion to waive the reading. Counselor Kane?
Thank you, Madam President. This resolution is similar to that of Councilor Phelan's that was put forward just a few weeks ago regarding the request to have the administration look into the potential acquisition of the Beachcomber parcel. 0 Harriet Ave, which is an area in the Montclair neighborhood of Quincy. There's been a proposed project down there which has caused considerable consternation before it's even been filed. And we held a neighborhood meeting a couple weeks ago, which was very energetic. And basically what came out of this meeting was the suggestion that we take a look into acquiring this parcel so that we can protect this area. It does abut a wetland. It's in a primarily residential A neighborhood. And could potentially have various adverse effects on both the neighborhood as well as the environmental concerns at the wetlands. So I'm making a request and ask for the support of my colleagues in this vote to have the administration take a look into acquiring this parcel at 0 Harriet Ave. I'd like to, do we take a vote on this?
I need a motion and then.
Okay,
second.
I'll motion to approve, and I guess I'd like this moved into finance and environmental so we can have further deliberations on this.
Great, thank you. So we have a motion to approve by Counselor Kane and then to move it into Finance and Environmental Committees. Do I have a second? Seconded by Counselor Harris. Okay, any discussion on the item? Okay, Madam Clerk, can you call the roll?
Counselor Kane.
Yes.
Counselor Kroll. Yes. Counselor DeBona. Yes. Counselor Harris. Counselor Mahoney. Yes. Counselor McCarthy. Yes. Counselor Phelan. Yes. President Liang.
Yes.
8 members.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, can you call number 4, please, on the agenda?
Number 4, 2020-060, a resolve for the Access Road Dog Park and Animal Shelter update.
Motion to waive the reading by Counselor Mahoney.
I
Thank you very much, Madam President. So this is a reintroduction of an order that I did last year, and I was joined by Councilor Brian Pamucci to do this as well. What I'm hoping to do is, we did not have the Park Department do the mid-year update. It's the last one of the group. I'd like to add this to his mid-year update and hopefully have it within the next meeting, or if not, the next meeting on 3/23, the meeting on 4/6. And basically, what I'm asking for is a full review of the access road and the dog park. Basically, the taxpayers deserve a timely update for this, and where the council had updated it for $3.5 million for the road, and there was questions as to whether or not the road should or should not have been worked on, but there has been extensive expenses that have gone on in the dog park and in the road, and I'd like that as well as the presentation, so a review of the financials as well as the timely manner of that. I think the dog park is almost done, but I just know that there's been a lot of money spent up there, and there's not a lot left over for the animal shelter, and my concern was that we were trying to avoid spending $7.1 million on an animal shelter, and we are exhausting funds right now, and I want to make sure there's enough money to do the animal shelter. Thank you.
Okay, so do I have a motion to approve and to move it to a committee?
Yep.
Do you have a particular committee you'd like to have it moved to?
I think it should go into oversight.
Oversight, okay. All right, so we have a motion to approve and move to oversight. Do we have a second? Seconded by Councilor Kroll. Any discussion on the item? Okay, Madam Clerk, can you call the roll, please?
Counselor Kane. Yes. Counselor Kroll. Yes. Counselor DeBona. Yes. Counselor Harris. Yes. Counselor Mahoney. Yes. Counselor McCarthy. Yes. Counselor Phelan. Yes. President Liang.
Yes.
8 members.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, next item on the agenda.
Number 5, 2020-061, a resolve request for the Attorney General's Office to review the disability pension determination of John Ryan.
Thank you. Okay. Any action on the item? Any motions? Councilor Mahoney?
So I'm introducing this tonight, where there has been a lot of news on Channel 5 and the Patriot Ledger reporting about the appropriateness of the disability retirement of Sergeant John Ryan. This distinctly separates John Ryan from the homeroom petition that was made for John Ryan's son. So this is completely separate from John Ryan's son, and it's distinctly talking about the disability retirement of John Ryan. Whereas a number of people have received and become aware of the anonymous letter, which is not being introduced here tonight, but there's been action taken on that. And where the city of Quincy is requesting the retirement pension and entitlement disability pension. There's a lot of questions out there in the market right now, so in the city. And what I'm really asking for is the Attorney General, which is already looking into it, but for the council as a whole to join with me. Sergeant Ryan has many years of commendable service here in the city of Quincy, and the request is just as much for him as it is for the citizens to have that have raised this concern. And to be able to do this fairly and without bias, I really do feel like we need to join together and ask for this investigation to happen through the AG. The AG does have an Office of Public Integrity unit where they have the necessary resources to be able to investigate an authority and perform an impartial review and to determine the validity of the allegations and the appropriateness of the disability pension that had been awarded to Sergeant Ryan. I honestly believe that the AG will be able to ensure a high level of integrity in this investigation and will help restore the confidence in our government and in our city, and assuring the public that this is being taken care of with the utmost consideration to make sure that we're coming to the correct conclusions to be able to move forward. So I do ask my fellow colleagues to join me in asking the AG to take a look at this. And for questions that were asked, I did reach out to PERIC, and I did review this with them. And they made me very aware that this has already gone to the AG's office. So this isn't something that we would be doing alone. It's already there at the AG's office, and it's something that we should take it should be something we all want to do to make sure that we're clearing the city of any kind of wrongdoing, which may or may not happen, because we certainly don't have the information to do that. And we should certainly want to do that for John Ryan as well. So I'm asking my fellow colleagues to join me in that tonight.
Okay, so is there a motion and then to refer it to committee as well?
Nope, I would like to make a motion.
Just a motion to approve? Okay. Before I ask for a second, if I could, because my understanding of this is that, as you had mentioned, it is an ongoing investigation. And so when it comes to ongoing investigations and our participation in that, in our capacity here as counselors, I would like to, if I could, call up our solicitor to just comment on this, because again, if it is an ongoing investigation, I just want to clarify on this matter what our position is.
Good evening, Madam
evening.
President and members of the council. I understand the resolve, and I've just heard the intent behind it. And from the perspective of a lawyer looking at it, I would just indicate to the council that a prosecuting agent in the Commonwealth, such as the Attorney General, they enjoy broad discretion. It's called prosecutorial discretion to investigate matters, to choose not to investigate matters. Over the past year, you may have read in the newspapers about issues involving the Suffolk County DA and Noel Prosing, which is refusing to prosecute matters where judges have disagreed with her. So prosecutors enjoy broad discretion. And beginning with that fundamental proposition, this particular matter, if we're looking at the allegations that we've all been made aware of, they harken back to 2010, 2011 era. So to start with, as a lawyer, I would indicate that the first thing I see is an issue with the statute of limitations, that it's perhaps expired as to some of these issues. There may be live issues and there may be concerns, but that would be up to the Attorney General. And I would just, the other thing is, there's a letter that that Councilor Mahoney referenced, and I've read that letter. It was directed to the U.S. Attorney's Office. So where the matter's been referred to the U.S. Attorney's Office, I don't know whether it's prudent for this body to ask a different prosecuting agency to step up and engage. And as Councilor Mahoney indicated, apparently everyone's aware of it anyway, and I would just caution that it's, at least in my mind, unprecedented. I'm not sure that there would be any occasion when someone would actually ask a prosecutor to look at something. They're paid to make the determination whether to proceed or not. It might be the case here that something like expiration of the statute of limitations, the fact that this all occurred back in 2010, 2011, and is now being brought to light, that could be an issue that would influence the Attorney General. So is it fair to that office to ask them to investigate, notwithstanding the fact that they, as trained lawyers, might know that due to the age of it, some of it might be not worthy of their time and expense. They have to balance things. And then the other little caution is they're certainly not going to report back to the City Council of Quincy on this. The Attorney General is an agency of the state, and it will take whatever action it deems appropriate. In addition to the particular arm that Councilor Mahoney talked about, they conduct criminal investigations. There's other civil sorts of remedies that they can pursue, but it's a very discretionary area of a state body, and I'm just cautioning you to consider the fact that it would be somewhat unprecedented for a municipal city council to exert some sort of influence on how that discretion is exercised.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate your clarification. Thank you. So we have a motion to approve but not to refer it to committee. Do we have a second? Okay. Next item, Madam Clerk, please. Approval of previous meeting minutes, please. Motion to approve by Councilor Kane. Do we have a second? Oh, sorry. Councilor Harris, second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Any communications and reports from the mayor, other city officers, and city boards? And Madam Clerk, I believe you have some traffics.
Yes, I do. I have some traffics this evening that I would like to refer to Ordinance Committee for Advertising. Ward 1, add do not enter to Calvin Road, 7:30 a.m. to 9 a.m., 2 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. on school days. Ward 4, add two-way parking at Frederick Street, Adele Road, and Bunker Hill Lane. Ward 5, add do not enters at 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. at Willow Ave, Anderson Road, Oakland Ave, George Road, and Morley Street, intersecting with Furnace Brook Parkway. Add handicap loading zone at 42 Willard Ave. Add do not enters 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. at Cedar Street, Willow Ave, George Road intersecting with Newport Ave. Add no parking on the north side of Kemper Street, Elm Ave, and Waterston Ave. Add 2-hour parking on the south side of Kemper Street, Elm Ave, and Waterston Ave.
Thank you. So we'll refer those traffics to ordinance committee.
Thank you.
Okay, unfinished business and preceding meeting. Okay, seeing none, reports of committees. Council McCarthy?
Thank you, Madam President. Earlier, Finance Committee, we had discussion on 2020-011, which was in order of taking for 24 Broad Street, 3945 Broad Street, and 40 Field. Mr. Jim Masterson and Mr. Timmons both came up and spoke of the ranges that the estimates were in December and what they are now. I'd like to move forward with a vote in a motion to approve that 2020-11 land order taking in regards to three sections in the one order. 24 Broad Street at the 1.95 million, 3945 Broad Street at 3.75 million, and 40 Field at 1 million, for a total of 6.7 million. I put that in the form of a motion.
Okay, so there's one motion to approve the full order for the 6.7 million, correct?
Yeah,
Okay,
all three in 6.7 million, and I just gave the breakdown.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. So there's a motion on the floor. Do we have a second? Second by Councilor Harris. Any discussion? Okay, Madam Clerk, can you call the roll, please?
Counselor Kane. Yes. Counselor Kroll.
Yes.
Counselor DeBona.
Yes.
Counselor Harris. Counselor Mahoney. Counselor McCarthy.
Yes.
Counselor Phelan. President Liang.
Yes.
7 members. Passes.
Thank you. I believe we have some reports from the Public Works Committee as well. Councilor Harris?
Thank you. Earlier this evening, there was a public hearing on the request at 720 utility grant location, Mass Electric, Woburn Road, positive recommendation form from the Public Works Committee.
Okay, so this
Make
is
a
for,
motion. This is for Woburn Road,
okay, so I have a motion to.
2020-041.
Okay, so motion to approve for Woburn Road. Do we have a second? Second by Councilor McCarthy. Any discussion on this matter? Madam Clerk, can you call the roll, please?
Counselor Kane. Yes. Counselor Kroll. Counselor DeBona.
Yes.
Counselor Harris.
Yes.
Counselor Mahoney. Counselor McCarthy.
Yes.
Counselor Phelan. Yes. President Liang.
Yes.
8 members.
Thank you. Okay. And we're actually just going to move back up out of order to the communications. We have a communications from one of our colleagues, Councilor Mahoney.
Thank you very much. I apologize, I didn't think you saw me waving. I do have an additional
didn't,
communication. I am going to be sending a letter to the Attorney General in regards, and I'd like to read it into the record. The Patriot Ledger and newspaper, and the Patriot Ledger newspaper and Channel 5 have recently raised some concerns about allegations of the disability retirement granted to former police Sergeant John Ryan. The news stories suggest that Sergeant Ryan might not have been working at the time of the car accident and not entitled to his disability retirement. Officer Ryan has many years of service in the city of Quincy at the time of the accident. It appears the only allegations are whether or not he was entitled to the disability retirement. A number of the constituents of the city of Quincy have raised and called to express their concerns in regards to this. In order to maintain the public confidence of these allegations, they must be reviewed without bias outside of the city of Quincy. As a city councilor at large representing the taxpayers and the city of Quincy, I hereby ask that your office undertake a fair and impartial review of the facts and circumstances that led to the determination of the disability retirement of Sergeant Ryan. Your help and assistance would be much appreciated by the residents of the city of Quincy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, presentations of petitions, memorials, and remonstrance. Councilor McCarthy?
Thank you, Madam President. This is a belated obituary. It happened last week, but I wanted to read it tonight. I think everyone's familiar with Eddie Grennan, who works for Chris Cassani down in T-Pal. His mom passed away after a long battle with brain cancer. She was only 65 years old. Kathleen M. Gallagher Grennan, beloved wife of Ed Grennan, who she met in Jamaica Plain as a teenager and whom she has shared over 50 years with. They were inseparable until the time of passing, and she was one of 6 children, the late Josephine and Mary Irene Gallagher. Eddie resides down in Germantown and is a great asset to all of us in the traffic, parking, and lighting, and I just want to pass on our prayers and thoughts. The services were last week, but I wanted to make sure everyone was aware of this and possibly could reach out to Ed with a card, or the next time they see him, they could pass on their condolences.
That'd be a great
Thank
idea.
you.
Thank you, Counselor. Thank you. Counselor Harris?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. Tonight, obviously, it's with a heavy heart, one of our own, with the passing of Mary Judith Judy Newton, mother of our Assistant City Clerk. Also, Joe Newton was the former Ward 6 City Councilor. So it's, she was the beloved wife of 62 years of Joseph J. Newton Jr. of Quincy. Again, mother of Martha Hanner of Florida, mother of, again, Joseph Newton and his wife Laura of Quincy, Douglas Newton and his wife Nicole of Marshfield, Suzanne Newton and her husband Sean Toland of Quincy, sister of Teresa Terry Kearns of Rockland, Regina Jill Lacey of Quincy, and the late Rhoda Cotton. Cherished grandmother of Jimmy Hanna, Dougie, and Jackie Newton, Lindsay, Gavin, Shawnee Toland, and Abigail and Michael Newton. She is also survived by 3 great-grandchildren. She'll be remembered as a devoted wife, a loving mother, and grandmother who cherished her family. She will be sadly missed. Relatives and friends, again, a celebration of life is tomorrow morning at 9:45 at Cohen's Funeral Parlor, followed by the funeral mass at 10:30 a.m. at St. Anne's. And of course, again, our hearts go out to Assistant City Clerk Joe Newton, who was a pal of mine, and we're all very. I know I think he all touches us all. Joe does with that big smile. And, so, thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Counselor Harris. I appreciate that. I know our hearts are with them, and I appreciate you mentioning that tonight. Okay, with that, if there's no more petitions, memorials, and nonsense, do I have a motion to adjourn? Oop. Just kidding. Sorry. Motions, orders, and resolutions. I thought we were done. Okay, scheduling of committee meetings and public hearings. Do we have? To schedule something? Okay. Councilor Mahoney?
I'd like to schedule an ordinance meeting on March 23rd. I'd like to have a 6:30 public hearing, followed by 6:35 the ordinance, and we'll be reviewing order number 2020-12 to revise and consolidate, amend, and codify the general ordinances of the city of Quincy.
Okay, perfect. So that's for Monday, March 23rd. Any other scheduling of committee meetings or public hearings? Okay, now I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn, thank you. At 8:17. 8:17? 8:17.